Some of you may have seen me wiping my eyes. I wasn't crying. As you get a certain age, you can sometimes get dry eyes and you tend to tear. So I was wiping those tears. Not to say that I'm not moved by what was said here tonight. I tell you the truth, I didn't expect any of this, and I didn't expect the response the book received. In fact, when I was writing the book, my main motivation, method when I was writing the book was determined really by something I'd read from E.H. Carr, who was a great close contemporary of Isaac Deutscher, who Isaac Deutscher knew well, and Carr became a Marxist in the probably Brian knows this better than I do. He became a Marxist in the process of writing his famous History of the Russian Revolution. But I'm saying this to you now because it's very important we all think of it, and that is Carr's famous statement was, very often the history is made by the people who write it. And very often the people who write our history are our opponents. Are our opponents who are hostile to our ideas, who want to demoralize us. Very important to keep that in mind, which is why we have to write our history. Really why. And so I'm hoping some of you comments here, when you read this, you'll say, you know, I think I could do that. And maybe even a little bit better. Maybe even a little bit better. But first of all, let me thank the speakers for their very generous comments. Very generous comments. Thank you. I say that to each. Very understanding comments. I'd like to thank Greg and Pansy for putting this event on. Somebody has to do it. I would say Pansy was tireless and sending out notices. I'm sure all your inboxes are full because they went out. Thank you very much for doing that, Pansy. And I'd also at this point say something else. I'd like to give a word of thanks to Derek O'Keefe, who edited the book, who worked hard on it. And I'd also like to thank Lauren Boxall, who worked hard trying to get a decent product going. Because Jess and my motivation when we were doing this was trying to get something that was half decent and we wouldn't be ashamed of. Of course, when you're doing something like that, there are compromises. You always make compromises. Not as good as you'd want. You know, we had many discussions, many arguments. Should we have an index? Where should the footnotes? All these sorts of things. But I stress on you, let's not produce low quality products because we want them to be taken seriously. This brings me, the other person I want to thank is Jess, my partner Jess. This was really a team effort. I'll give you one example. Jess and I worked, she photographed a lot of the archives I visited. We brought them back, we worked on them. She was absolutely critical of that. And I couldn't have done this by myself, absolutely. You needed someone with you, and I'm sure the professors around here have their post-grad students who go on them in these expeditions and help do that work. In this case, it was Jess who did it. But more importantly, and we had a stroke of luck here, it was through Jess. As we were developing a book, and you've got to be open to these possibilities. We wanted to include some photographs of the experiences because someone in England, my good friend Phil Hurst, who's a teacher, who's very experienced, he said to me, you know what? Young people like photographs. Get some photographs into it. I've known Phil for a very long time, and it's true. So what we did is we began to look for photographs. And Jess, through her diligence, suddenly we just found a trove of photographs in the Canadian National Archives that had been deposited there by Michelle Lambeth. most of you don't know who Michel Lambeth is. Michel Lambeth is one of our Canada's great photographic artists. He's on the same, as I say in the book, he's on the same level as Dorothea Lange. Anybody who's in photography would know what I'm talking about. Dorothea Lange in the United States from the Works Projects Administration, famous photograph. You look at his work, it's tremendous. So we saw it, and we saw the photographs, so we said, well, we'll include as many as we can, because the photographs had been sitting in the archives and no one had really identified the people in them. And they happened to be at a very early part, the beginning of Michel's life, when he decided to become a professional photographer. He bought a Leica, he used it in our little election campaign, 1956. He photographed all of us, and that was the beginning of his life in photography. Now, the story is a sad story. He was never recognized as a great photographer. Never. He was recognized by other photographers as a great photographer, but not by the cultural establishment. But Michel became homeless in the 70s. I lost touch with him. I got this from Joe Rosenblatt, a very important Canadian poet who was in our movement. And he told me Michel became homeless and committed suicide. I tell you, it's one of those great stories which has to be, I think, has to be told. And I understand there are some people who are working on that. So that was Jess's efforts to get those photographs in, and I think they make a difference to the book when I'm looking at it. Make it very pleasant to look at it and to see. Actually, it was for me a great sense of pride to look at these individuals whom I'd worked with and give them names. You know, Paddy Stanton's in there, who was the centre of the wobbly movement in the West Coast, a very important comrade. You have Max Armstrong. Max Armstrong, a founder of the Socialist Party of Canada. That's going back a bit. And then a founder of the Communist Party of Canada in the central leadership, you know, role. His photographs in it. Some of these people are very important. Now, of course, my thanks, I have to thank you all for coming out here tonight, of course. Thank you again, and I'm somewhat overwhelmed to see so many old comrades here, friends from the Socialist Project, old comrades from the League for Socialist Action, Social Projects, Toronto Workers' Assembly, and a few brothers and sisters from CUPE Local 1, where I had some very important tribute experience. It's also, I think, I'm very pleased that IS comrades are here. I'm very pleased that when I phoned Carolyn, I said, here's the phone call. I said, Jess, Carolyn, you know what it's like, you're sort of a bit timid. I said, Carolyn, it's Ernie. She said, yes, I accept. That's what it was like. That was a welcome. She had some idea that I was maybe calling. Now let me say a few words about how the book began. This is important to know. It actually began in the early, in about the middle of the last decade, 2005, 2006, when Peter Graham came to see me, and lo and behold, sat me down in front of a tape recorder and asked me some questions, and I rattled on for a bit, and then Peter banged it out in a typewriter, gave it back to me, and I began to work on it, and I gave it back to him, made the corrections, etc. And then David Camfield came to see me. Similar projects, students who, I don't know, working on projects, part of their studies. It was sort of quite interesting to do that, and I was very pleased with it, of course. And then John Radel, who was doing his own work in this period, who was going around interviewing different comrades. In the LSA, George Bryant, for example, is a book. He interviewed George Bryant, other people, to get it down, the record, to find it. Because these people are dying. They're fewer and fewer of them. So John was doing that, and then it was my turn, so he sat me down and asked me some questions. John's a very fast typist. He went back and he banged it out and he had it back to me. But as I was looking at these things, and if you want to start, why don't you start that way? That's one way to start. But it was unsatisfactory. These things are unsatisfactory because there's no documentation. It's very schematic. When you see it on paper, it sounds brilliant when you're talking, but you see it on paper, it's not so good. And so I said, I began to work, and I said, well, maybe I could put something out, maybe do something, because I felt there was a need to maybe go over some of the experiences that I'd participated in and try and record them. And I said, well, maybe I'll knock something off quickly, maybe 60 pages, and that'll do it, get it out of the way. And as I began to work on it, of course, what tends to happen is the story takes over. You have to be faithful to the story. You have to pursue it. Even, it's sometimes very difficult. So Jess and I decided to make this as good as we could make it. We consulted the various archives. There's the Ross Dowson Internet Archive, was the first one I went through the material. Ian Angus's Socialist History Project, a lot of our old documents are there. I worked on that. I did the best I could. And then I began looking in the archives, because as I began to write the story, I said it's not sufficient. There's certain historical methods you have to use, and that is you have to try to the best of your ability to give some documentation, some reference points, so that it's not Ernie Tate rattling on with his opinions. So I tried to remain as faithful as I could to that process. As most of you know, if you read the book, you'll know I'm not an academic. I could not be confused with one. When you quit school in Belfast at age 13, you're not an academic. You're doing the best you can. You learn a lot from your comrades. My experience is one, as I was around the movement, is being educated by the comrades around me, how to write, suffering that torture. I remember Richard Fiddler, who was editing the paper, had given these tortured articles, and he'd throw his hands up, because he thought I'd write them on the night shift, because I'd be working night shift, I'd get it to him, and he would work hard. So that's basically was my experience. I've been writing mainly journalistic articles. This is the longest piece I've done ever. But I must say this whole thing coincided, as I began this, it's kind of reading of transcripts, coincided with some, it's one of those niggling little things that are sometimes we would carry with us for a while you don't deal with. And this is a personal thing. And this concerns Vern Olsen. I knew Vern very well, the founder of one of the leaders of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, whom I knew very well, worked, and it's very important. And Vern, towards the latter end of his life, he had some real difficulties, and I got to know him fairly well. Jess and I got to know him very well. But he died of a heart attack in 1999. And this man was a heroic individual, powerful individual. He died in 1999, and there was no obituary written for him. None of us produced an obituary. I always felt someone had to do something. So when I started to write, I said to myself, well, if you look at what the Canadians did when the Cuban Revolution developed, it was a remarkable thing. And we should learn something from this, because it's remarkable. We, as a relatively small organization, here we took on this tremendous task of trying to find breathing space for that revolution, trying to find room for it so that it could talk to people in its own language and not have the imperialists and their propaganda things drown it out. And the Canadian experience in the fair play for Cuba, and with the fair play for Cuba, is one of those proud experiences, really part of the history of the working class of Canada. Because what we did was because the working class responded. We had tremendous results in the West Coast, the BC Federation of Labour. To this day, there's a long friendliness among Canadian working people towards Cuba. That's it. And we helped. Don't think we decided that. But as someone said in the course of the evening, there was nothing like this in the English-speaking world. The Americans had one, but ours was, what we did here lasted longer, had a broader reach, was non-sectarian, and I thought and it's something to learn. And what I think we should try and learn is the methodology we use, the non-sectarian methodology, where you try to work with all those forces. You don't demand agreement and everything. You approach them with a certain integrity, a certain confidence that you're going to be loyal to them and not pull the rug out from them or do nasty things to them. That methodology was critical in that. And that basically is what we used. That was our template for our work against the Vietnam War. And it's what we did in Britain. I mean, that motivated me. Now, when Brian was talking, part of the problem you have when you tell the story, people think you are the story. Well, it's what Ernie did. He's right. I tried to write this in such a way where you can judge. I have my opinions on this. I went through some fights and all the rest. But I tried to be fair to the various participants so that you, the reader, can make some judgments on your own. I'm not trying to snow you. I'm trying to give you enough material to do that. That's the advantage of writing a memoir. It doesn't have to be a history. It's not the history. But it has to adhere to certain rules of writing history, I think. But by its very nature, it's selective. I didn't put everything in. I had many experience. This is not. What I tried to do is write about the movement that we were involved, that all of us were involved in. Those people who are not here and participated in that made their contribution to it. I'm trying to sort of give recognition to that, and we should be proud of that. And I was going to say, one of the campaigns we carried, it was a short campaign, was defense of the Algerian Revolution in 1964. Art Young was key in that. He's not here, he's away somewhere. But that was a part. I don't say anything about that. I just touched it. I couldn't touch everything. And let me say, one of the problems you have if you're writing a piece, especially if you're not an academic, is the question, as you're proceeding with this, who the hell is going to publish it? I mean, Ernie Tate, who's he? I'm not able to say. I'm from this. Even good radical academics have a hard time getting their stuff published. Really. Good radical, they have a hard time because we have to appreciate that they fight the ruling class in the halls of learning. It's a continual struggle at an ideological level. And they have a hard time getting their stuff published. So when you get a guy like me, no names, what would I say? Never published before, that's a concern. And if it was not for little publishing houses like Resistance Books in London, who took the book and said, we'll go with this, we'll publish it, we'll try and distribute it, a small organization, run mainly with volunteers. You'll find out all these little publishing houses are like that. Then I must say, in my thanks, I have to say a thanks to them, because they came across and helped us produce this book. If it wasn't for them, I doubt a book like this would find the light of day. But so that's why it's important for you to buy this book. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much, comments.